Osman II, Genç Osman, the youngest sultan in Ottoman history, was dragged through the streets of Istanbul by his own soldiers, thrown into a fortress, strangled, and had his nose and ears cut off. Osman II was 17 years old when his own janissaries decided he had to go. He had tried to reform the Ottoman military, to break the power the janissaries held over the throne, and they responded by turning on him in a full rebellion in May 1622. They pulled him from the palace, marched him through the streets of Istanbul in front of crowds while people watched in disbelief, and threw him into Yedikule fortress. Inside those walls, the executioner strangled him with a bowstring, then crushed his testicles, then severed his nose and ears, and sent them to the palace, as proof the job was done. He was the first Ottoman Sultan ever murdered by his own soldiers. Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman Sultan, who ordered 280 women tied into weighted sacks and drowned in the Bosphorus in a single night, was later strangled in his own cell by order of his own mother. Ibrahim the Mad spent years locked inside the cage, the isolation rooms where Ottoman princes were kept to prevent rebellion, and by the time he became sultan, his mind had completely broken. He ruled for 8 years in a state of total paranoia and madness. One night in 1640, convinced one of his concubines had been with another man, he ordered all 280 women of his harem bound in weighted sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus. In 1648, his own military, religious leaders, and his mother Kosem Sultan jointly deposed him. 10 days later, he was strangled in his cell. His replacement on the throne was his 7-year-old son, Shehzade Mustafa, the most beloved prince in the entire Ottoman Empire, the man every soldier wanted as their next sultan, was strangled inside his own tent by deaf-mute executioners sent personally by his own father. Shehzade Mustafa was everything the empire wanted in an heir. He was brave, respected by the military, admired across the provinces, and widely expected to become one of the greatest sultans in Ottoman history. His stepmother Hürrem Sultan convinced Suleiman he was plotting a rebellion. In October 1553, Mustafa was summoned to his father's military tent during a campaign in Anatolia. The moment he entered, deaf-mute palace executioners attacked him with bowstrings. Mustafa fought back with his bare hands, breaking free from their grip multiple times before they finally overpowered him. His body was carried out and displayed in front of the entire army. The janissaries wept openly. The empire never fully recovered from that decision. Shehzade Bayezid Hey. He crossed the border into Persia to save his own life, and his own father paid 400,000 gold coins to the Persian Shah to have him dragged back out and strangled alongside every single one of his young sons. Shehzade Bayezid had fought a civil war against his own brother Selim for the right to succeed Suleiman the Magnificent. He lost, fled with his remaining forces across the Persian border, and threw himself on the mercy of Shah Tahmasp I, believing Persian soil would keep him safe. The Shah welcomed him. Then Suleiman sent Ottoman ambassadors carrying 400,000 gold coins and a simple request: hand him over. The Shah accepted the gold. On September 25, 1561, Ottoman executioners arrived in Kazvin. They strangled Bayezid with a bowstring. Then they strangled all 4 of his young sons one by one in the same room. A father had paid an enemy king to call, his own child, Mehmed III. On the very night he became sultan, 19 of his own brothers were strangled simultaneously across the palace, the youngest just 11 years old, and their coffins were carried out through the palace gates the following morning in a single procession. Mehmed III ascended to the Ottoman throne in January 1595 and immediately activated the law of fratricide, the Ottoman tradition that allowed a new sultan to execute all male relatives to prevent future challenges. But no sultan before him had ever done it on this scale in a single night. 19 brothers. Deaf-mute executioners moved through the palace room by room, bowstring by bowstring. The youngest was 11 years old. Several were still children. The following morning, 19 small coffins were carried out of the palace gates in a procession that the people of Istanbul watched in complete silence. Mehmed III then had his pregnant concubines drowned to eliminate any further competition before it could even be born. Selim I, the grim Selim I, the most feared sultan in Ottoman history, the man who executed 7 of his own grand viziers personally, was not cuck. Led in battle or by a rival, Selim the Grim tripled the size of the Ottoman Empire in just 8 years, conquered Egypt, Syria, and Persia, and was so terrifying that his own ministers reportedly kept written wills on their person at all times before attending his meetings. Then, in 1520, somewhere on the road near Chorlu, a massive carbuncle erupted on his back. It was anthrax, a skin infection that had been quietly spreading through his body for weeks. There was no treatment that could stop it. The infection spread deeper, the fever climbed, and the pain became unbearable. The man who had made an entire empire tremble spent his final weeks being dissolved from the inside by a boil on his own back. He was 50 years old. Pargali Ibrahim Pasha, the most powerful man in the Ottoman Empire after the Sultan himself, best friend of Suleiman the Magnificent for 15 years, was invited to dinner one evening and strangled in his sleep that same night by deaf-mute palace executioners. Pargali Ibrahim Pasha had risen from a slave boy to Grand Vizier, commanding armies, negotiating with kings, and running the entire Ottoman Empire on Suleiman's behalf. They had grown up together. Suleiman had once publicly promised that he would never have Ibrahim executed. On the night of March 15, 1536, the two men shared a private dinner inside Topkapi Palace, as they had done countless times before. Ibrahim went to his chambers afterward and fell asleep. Deaf-mute executioners entered his room while he slept, wrapped a bowstring around his neck, and strangled him. His body was found the next morning still warm in his bed. Suleiman never publicly explained why. Murad IV, the most brutal sultan of the 17th century, a man who personally walked the streets of Istanbul at night, executing people with his own hands, died at 27, rotted from the inside by the same wine he was publicly executing everyone else for drinking. Murad IV took the Ottoman throne during a period of total chaos and ruled through absolute terror. He banned coffee, tobacco, and alcohol across the entire empire, carrying out executions himself in the streets to enforce it. He was also secretly drinking himself to death in private. By 1640, his liver had given out completely. Cirrhosis led him at just 27 years old. On his deathbed, consumed by paranoia even as he was dying, he ordered the execution of his last surviving brother Ibrahim, which would have ended the entire Ottoman bloodline forever. His own mother physically blocked the executioners at the chamber door and refused to let them through. Abdulaziz, the Sultan, who ruled the most powerful empire in the modern world, was deposed in a coup, locked inside a palace, and found 6 days later with both wrists slashed open 3 centimeters deep. And the question of whether he was murdered or took his own life has never been fully answered. Abdulaziz was removed from the Ottoman throne on May 30, 1876, by his own ministers in a military coup and transferred under guard to Feriye Palace on the banks of the Bosphorus. He was given scissors to trim his beard. 4 days later, on June 4th, he was found both wrists cut deeply, blood across the floor. An official inquest ruled suicide, but a senior Ottoman official was assassinated shortly afterward by a man who publicly claimed to be avenging the Sultan's murder. Abdulaziz was 46 years old. The truth of what happened inside that room has never been confirmed. Selim II, the drunkard, the most powerful ruler on the entire planet in 1574, commanding 3 continents and the greatest navy in the world, did not die in battle or by poison. He slipped on wet marble in his own private bathhouse while drunk and cracked his skull open on the floor. Selim II inherited the greatest empire on earth from his father Suleiman the Magnificent and spent most of his reign leaving the actual governing to his Grand Vizier while he focused on wine. He was so devoted to drinking that he launched a military campaign specifically to seize Cyprus, reportedly because he wanted access to its famous wines. On December 15, 1574, Selim entered his private bathhouse at Topkapi Palace after a heavy session of drinking, slipped on the wet marble floor, and struck his head. He never recovered from the injury. The Ottoman Empire's most humiliating royal death happened completely alone on a bathroom floor. Some Sultan. The Ottoman prince who should have been Sultan spent 13 years being passed between the Pope, the King of France, and European royal courts, like a bargaining chip, and was eventually poisoned alone in a foreign country, never once allowed to return home. Cem Sultan lost a civil war against his brother Bayezid II in 1481 and fled to the Knights of Rhodes for protection. What followed was one of the most degrading imprisonments in royal history. European powers discovered that keeping an Ottoman prince gave them enormous leverage over the empire, so Cem was transferred from court to court, kept comfortable but never free. used as a political tool for over a decade. The Pope was paid 40,000 gold florins annually just to keep him confined in Rome. In 1495, when he was finally handed over to the French, he died within weeks, almost certainly poisoned. He was 35 years old and had not seen his homeland in 14 years. Bayezid II, the Sultan who ruled the Ottoman Empire for 31 years, was forced off his own throne at sword point by his own son, and died on the road to exile within weeks, almost certainly poisoned by his son's personal physician before he could ever reach safety. Bayezid II had ruled since 1481 and was known as a patient, scholarly sultan, the opposite of the violent men who surrounded him. His own son Selim raised an army against him in 1512, marched on Constantinople, and forced his father to abdicate at sword point in front of the court. Bayezid was allowed to leave for his birthplace of Dimitoka in peace, or so it appeared. He never arrived. He fell gravely ill on the road within days of leaving the capital. Historical accounts strongly suggest that Selim's personal Jewish physician administered poison before Bayezid could reach safety and potentially rally support. He died on the road on May 26, 1512. Mehmed VI, the last sultan, 600 years of unbroken Ottoman power ended on a single November night in 1922, when the last sultan crept out of his own palace in secret, boarded a British warship in the darkness, and sailed away forever, dying alone, broke, and stateless in Italy 4 years later. Mehmed VI was the 36th and final sultan of the Ottoman Empire. By 1922, the empire had been dismantled by World War I. The Turkish nationalist movement under Mustafa Kemal had taken control of the country, and the sultanate was formally abolished. On the morning of November 17, 1922, Mehmed slipped out of Topkapi Palace before dawn, climbed into an ambulance to avoid being seen, and was rowed out to a waiting British warship in the Bosphorus. He never set foot in Istanbul again. He died in San Remo, Italy, on May 16, 1926, alone, financially ruined, and completely forgotten by the world his ancestors had ruled for 6 centuries.